Today we are recognizing the 76th anniversary of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. That, of course, sparked the start of World War II, and millions of Americans joined. Bob Ryan, one of those Americans, and at this point, not many veterans from World War II still around, but you are one of those people, and you're here to share your story. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome.
So the bombing of Pearl Harbor happened while you were a sophomore in high school.
That's correct.
What was your immediate reaction?
I was really outraged, and I knew almost soon after that, the draft being 21 years at that time, that I wasn't going to wait 21 years to be drafted. And even when I was still a sophomore, I knew I was going to enlist as soon as I graduated from high school.
What was it that made you want to jump right into that?
Part of the outrage that we would be attacked by a country that we were not at war with. And I always kind of leaned towards getting into the Navy anyway. So the war gave me a good excuse to do it.
You were so young, you had to have a parent sign for you to enlist.
Mm-hmm.
You were just telling me off camera, your mother didn't want to sign.
No, she didn't want to sign. She didn't want me to go to war so young. But,
so your father signed?
My father signed.
Why did your father sign? Did he ever tell you?
No, but I kid around because when I got back and got married after the war, I still wasn't old enough to get married. And he had a sign for me to get married, and I sometimes wondered whether he was trying to get rid of me.
You were 17 years old. You were telling me you were one of the youngest in your battalion. What was that like to have, to be so young and going into such an intense scene?
Well, it was interesting at best. And as I said before, I had never really been out of New Jersey that I can remember, except to go to New York City, which was only 10 to 15 minutes away from where I lived in New Jersey. And it was a whole new experience. And it was one that, you know, in the service you have moments of excitement, a few moments of terror, and hours of boredom. But we traveled a lot. I served a year in Europe and a year in the Pacific, and I went 2/3 around the world, and I was excited being in the service.
What were some of your favorite areas to see while you were traveling?
Well, in Europe, I spent 4 or 5 months in southern England when we turned into an amphibious battalion, and we constructed pontoon invasion barges, which we manned during the invasion. So that's something that sticks in my mind quite clearly. In the Pacific, I was in the Philippines in the middle of nowhere for 4 or 5 months before the war ended, and I went to Japan with the occupation forces.
You talk about terrifying moments. The Battle of Normandy is something sophomores in high school learn about to this day. It's a part of history. That's a huge piece of our history. What was it like to be a part of that?
When I first reached the beach, it was about maybe 2 in the afternoon. Most of the fighting had progressed up the slope and was inland somewhere, the actual fighting. They were still shelling the beach occasionally to disrupt the shipments.
What do you remember from that then, from that day?
Oh, so many things. I guess I remember spending the first night sleeping on the beach. And the second night, we dug 2-man foxholes on the bluff above the beach. And we lived in those 2-man foxholes for almost 2 weeks, overlooking the beach, because our duties were down on the beach. So when we were on duty, we were up in the foxholes.
That's something so many of us will never experience. What was that like to live in a foxhole for 2 weeks?
Well, it was an interesting field. It was a field that hadn't been completely swept of mines. And my son was just reminding him this about me the other day because he was reading about it. We had to probe the ground with bayonets to look for anti-personnel miles before we started digging the foxholes. Wow. And I never found any. And I shared a foxhole with a fellow by the name of Rainier, who I became friendly with in the service. And we spent 2 weeks together in that foxhole.
We'll wrap this up with this big question, because you've lost a lot of the guys that you served with are now gone. You had some really great friends. What does this anniversary mean to you today?
Well, when we think about it, someone asked me just recently, do I think about Pearl Harbor? Very honest with you, I don't think about it that much. I pick up the paper and I say, oh, it's December 7th. I think more about Normandy than I do. I know on June 6th, I remember the invasion. But Pearl Harbor was something that maybe in the long run was a good thing. It got us into a war that had to be fought.
Bob Ryan, thank you for coming in and sharing your story, and thank you for your service.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And we will be right back.